My name is Tamsin Vane. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a world governed by two things: decimal points and cold, hard intent. I am a senior forensic auditor for a firm in Boston. My job is to walk into rooms filled with powerful men who think they've hidden their crimes in the basement of a spreadsheet, and I show them exactly where they left the bloodstains. I don't just crunch numbers. I hunt ghosts. I find the money that wasn't supposed to exist, and I track the people who tried to make it vanish. But 3 weeks ago, I realized I had missed the biggest fraud of my life. It wasn't in a corporate office. It was sitting at my parents' mahogany dining table. The air in the Vane household always smelled the same: expensive rosemary, floor wax, and a suffocating layer of unsaid things. My father, Alaric, sat at the head of the table. He was an architect by trade, a man who built structures meant to last centuries, but whose own soul seemed to be held together by spite and starch. My mother, Margot, sat to his right, her movements jagged and nervous, like a bird trapped in a crystal cage. Then there was Kael, my younger brother, the golden boy, the one whose life was a series of tragic near misses and expensive rescues. He sat across from me, picking at his chicken, his left hand hidden under the table, his right hand trembling just enough to make the ice in his glass clink against the crystal. Alaric didn't wait for the main course to be cleared. He didn't ask about my promotion. He didn't ask how my life was. He simply reached into his blazer, pulled out a stack of papers bound with a heavy-duty binder clip, and slammed them down next to my wine glass. $620,000, Tamsin, Alaric said. His voice was a low, resonant growl, the kind he used when I was a child and I'd stepped out of line. It was the voice of a judge delivering a sentence. That is the current valuation of the debt. We've carried it for 12 years. We're done. I didn't touch the papers. I didn't even blink. I have stared down embezzlers who were sweating through $5,000 suits. I wasn't going to flinch at my father. "Don't play the ice queen with me," he snapped, his eyes darkening. "We're talking about the fire. We're talking about Kael's lungs. We're talking about the 3 years of specialized treatments in Switzerland that kept him from suffocating because you were too busy playing with matches in the basement to notice the furnace was leaking." Switzerland, I repeated. The word tasted like copper in my mouth. 12 years ago, our family home burned. The fire department called it a furnace malfunction. My parents, however, called it my negligence. I was 22, home from college for the summer. I woke up to a wall of heat, grabbed a teenage Kael and dragged him through the smoke. I saved him, so I thought, but in the weeks that followed, they told me his lungs were shredded. They said the smoke had done permanent thermocaustic damage. They told me the only clinic that could save him was a private facility in the Alps. "You were the eldest," Margot chimed in, her voice trembling with that practiced, theatrical sorrow she had perfected over the years. "You were supposed to be watching him. We spend our retirement, our savings, the equity in this very house to save him from the damage you caused. And now Kael needs his own start. He needs a business. He needs the life you took from him." Alaric pushed a second document toward me. It was a legal contract. "You're a partner at your firm now. We know what you make. You will transfer $5,000 a month to the Vane Family Trust, starting Monday. If you don't, I will file the civil suit I've had drafted since you turned 21. I will ruin your professional reputation. I will tell your firm that their star auditor is a negligent arsonist who crippled her own brother." I looked at Kael. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at a mole on his forearm, looking like a victim in a tragedy he had spent a decade directing. He looked weak. He looked fragile. He looked expensive. "I see," I said. My voice was a flat line. "I see," Alaric mimicked, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "That's all you have to say? Your brother's life was nearly extinguished because of you, and all you have is 'I see'?" "I need to review the accounting," I said, standing up. I didn't take the papers. I didn't need them. I had already memorized the numbers on the top page. "I'll call you on Monday." "You'll sign on Monday," Alaric shouted as I walked toward the door, "or you'll find out exactly how quickly a career can burn down, Tamsin, just like the house." I walked out into the cool Boston night. My heart wasn't racing, it was slowing. In my world, when someone gets that aggressive about a debt, it usually means one of two things: they're desperate or they're lying. I went back to my apartment, but I didn't go to bed. I sat in the dark living room, the city lights streaking across my ceiling like digital ghosts. I opened my laptop. I didn't look at the papers Alaric gave me. I looked at the digital footprints. 12 years of guilt is a heavy weight. It makes you blind. It makes you want to pay any price to make the feeling go away. But as a forensic auditor, I know that guilt is a variable, not a constant, and variables can be manipulated. I started with the Vane family trust. It took me 4 hours to bypass the encryption my father used. He was an architect. He understood structural integrity in the physical world, but he didn't realize that in the digital world, walls are made of glass if you know where to throw the stone. I found the wire transfers from 12 years ago. Recipient: L'Esprit de Vie Clinic, Valais, Switzerland. Amount: $450,000. But then, I did something my father didn't expect. I didn't just look at the name of the clinic, I looked at the routing number. The money hadn't gone to Switzerland. It had traveled through a relay bank in Luxembourg and landed in a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands called AV Design Holdings. I felt a chill wash over me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. AV Design. Alaric Vane Design. My father hadn't spent $500,000 saving my brother's lungs. He had moved the money from one pocket to the other. And Kael? I looked at his recent medical records, the ones I'd pulled from the hospital portal where he'd gone for a minor respiratory infection last month. Doctor's notes: patient displays excellent lung capacity, no evidence of chronic scarring, no history of thermal caustic damage noted in imaging. The suffocating brother was a lie. The Switzerland treatments were a fiction. My entire life, my career choice, my 80-hour work weeks, the $400,000 I'd already given them in gifts over the years, it was all a scam. I wasn't a daughter. I was a long-term investment that they were finally ready to liquidate. I sat there until the sun began to bleed over the Atlantic. My parents had spent a decade telling me I owed them a blood debt. Well, it was time for an audit. Monday morning came with the kind of clarity that only comes after you've realized your entire foundation is built on a lie. I went to the office, but I didn't work on the client files. I worked on the veins. I have access to databases that most people don't know exist. I can see the flow of money like a heat map. I tracked AV Design Holdings further. It wasn't just holding the house insurance money, it was a laundry machine. 12 years ago, my father's firm was struggling. He had over-leveraged on a skyscraper project that stalled. He needed cash. He needed a lot of it. 2 weeks later, our house burned down. The insurance payout was massive, nearly $700,000, because of the art collection my mother claimed was lost in the study. I looked at the inventory list Margot had submitted to the insurance company in 2014. Item 14, Original Charcoal Sketch by Degas. Item 22, First Edition Signed Gatsby. I pulled the auction records from 2013. A charcoal sketch matching that description had been sold by a private seller in Boston, my mother, to a collector in London 6 months before the fire. They hadn't just committed arson, they had committed insurance fraud on a grand scale. They sold the assets, then burned them to get paid twice. And Kael? Kael was the perfect prop. His injury ensured that the fire marshal wouldn't look too closely. Who would suspect a father of arson when his own son was clinging to life? I spent the rest of the day building a master file. Every forged signature, every fraudulent claim, every wire transfer. I felt like I was dissecting my own childhood. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Alaric. Alaric, the bank info is in your email. I expect the first transfer by 5 p.m. Don't test me, Tamsin. I have the lawyer on standby. I replied with something I'd never said to him before. Tamsin, I've decided the payment plan is too slow. I'm going to liquidate my firm's partnership shares. I can give you the full $620,000 in one lump sum, but I want to do it in person. Sunday. I want Kael and Mom to witness the debt being settled once and for all. The reply was almost instantaneous. Alaric, that's my girl. I knew you'd do the right thing. We'll have a celebration dinner, 7 p.m. Celebration, I whispered to my empty office. You have no idea. I spent the next 3 days in the dark room, a secure, unlisted server room at my firm. I needed the final piece of the puzzle. I needed the fire marshal's report from 12 years ago, the one my father told me concluded it was my fault. I didn't find the report in the public archives. I found it in the archived investigations folder of the insurance company's legal department. It had been suppressed. The lead investigator, a man named Detective Miller, had written a dissenting opinion. Evidence of accelerant found in the basement furnace intake. Pattern suggests deliberate ignition from the interior. Request for further interview with Alaric Vane denied by senior management. Why was it denied? I dug deeper. The senior VP of the insurance company at the time was a man named Julian Thorne. I checked his current board memberships. He was the lead investor in my father's new architectural firm. It wasn't just a family scam, it was a conspiracy. My father had bought the insurance company's silence, and he'd used my life as the collateral. I printed everything. I bound it in a sleek black folder. I didn't look like a daughter anymore. I looked like an executioner. The air in the Vane house was festive when I arrived. Margot had cooked a standing rib roast. The table was set with the gold-rimmed plates, the ones they only used when they were winning. Kael looked better than I'd ever seen him. His respiratory struggle seemed to have vanished overnight at the prospect of $500,000. He was drinking a heavy red wine, laughing at something my father said. Tamsin, Alaric boomed, standing up to greet me. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back, adjusting my briefcase. You look professional, very serious. It's a serious amount of money, Alaric. Indeed, indeed. Well, let's eat first. We can handle the isness over dessert. The meal was a performance. Margot talked about Kael's new venture, a boutique design firm he wanted to start. Alaric talked about the legacy of the Vane name. They treated me like a guest of honor, but I could see their eyes flicking toward my briefcase every few minutes. They were hungry, not for the roast, but for the liquidation. When the coffee was served, Alaric leaned back and patted his stomach. All right, Tamsin, enough suspense. Let's see the paperwork. I didn't open the briefcase. I reached into my blazer and pulled out a small, high-definition recorder. I set it on the table. Before we talk about the money, I said, my voice cutting through the warmth of the room like a shard of ice, I want to talk about the fire. One last time. Margot's smile faltered. Oh, honey, we've moved past that. This is a night for new beginnings. No, I said. I need to hear it. Kael, tell me. Tell me about the smoke. Tell me about how it felt when your lungs burned. Kael shifted in his seat. He looked at Alaric. I mean, it was terrifying. I couldn't breathe. I still have the night terrors, Tamsin. The doctors said, Which doctors, Kael? The ones at the clinic in Switzerland? The clinic that doesn't exist? The silence that followed was absolute. Alaric's hand, which had been reaching for his coffee, froze in midair. What did you say? Alaric hissed. L'esprit de vie, I said. I looked for it. I wanted to send them a thank you note for saving my brother. But it's strange. There's no clinic by that name in the Valais region. There is, however, a bank account, AV Design Holdings. You didn't save his lungs, Dad. You saved your firm. You've been spying on us? Margot shrieked, her voice cracking. After everything we did, you ungrateful little... I'm an auditor, Mom, I said, standing up. I don't spy, I verify. And here is what I verified. I opened the briefcase and slid the black folder across the table. It landed with a heavy thud next to the rib roast. Page 1. The Degas sketch you sold in 2013 and then claimed was lost in the fire. Page 5. The original fire marshal's report identifying the kerosene in the furnace. Page 10. The wire transfers from the insurance payout directly into your private Cayman account. Alaric didn't reach for the folder. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. You think you're so smart. You think you can come into my house and threaten me. I'm your father. I'm an auditor under test, I said, and the audit is failing. I know about Julian Thorne. I know about the suppressed report, and I know that Kael hasn't had a single day of respiratory therapy in his life. Kael stood up, his face flushed. You don't know anything. I suffered. Shut up, Kael, I said, not even looking at him. You're a 30-year-old man living on a pension of lies. You're pathetic. Alaric stood up then, his chair screeching against the floor. He leaned over the table, his face inches from mine. You won't do anything. If you take this to the police, the family name is destroyed. Your career is destroyed. You're a Vane. You're part of this. That's the thing, Alaric, I said, pulling out my phone. I showed him the screen. It was a live stream to a secure server at my firm. I'm not a Vane anymore. I'm a whistleblower. The moment I walked in here, I triggered a dead man's switch. If I don't enter a code every 30 minutes, this entire file is sent to the IRS, the FBI, and the State Insurance Commission. Margot let out a choked sob. Alaric looked like he wanted to kill me. But, I said, I'm willing to negotiate. Negotiate what? Alaric spat. I'm not giving you the $620,000. I've already spent it. I bought the debt on this house. I bought the outstanding loans on your firm. I am officially your primary creditor. I leaned in, mirroring his posture. Starting tonight, Alaric, you and Mom are moving out. I'm selling this house to cover the restitution for the insurance company. You're going to move into a one-bedroom apartment in a zip code you can actually afford. And Kael is going to get a job. A real one, at a warehouse. I've already sent his resume to a friend of mine who manages a shipping dock. You can't do this, Margot whispered. We have nothing else. You have the truth, and as you've told me for 12 years, the truth is a debt that must be paid. I picked up my briefcase. I didn't look back. I walked out of the house, the gold-rimmed plates still sitting on the table, the dinner ruined, the legacy turned to ash. I got into my car and sat in the silence. My hands were finally steady. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a single old photo. It was the only thing I'd saved from the fire. Me and Kael, before the lies started. I tore it in half. The audit was finally over. I didn't expect them to crawl into a hole and wait for the end. I'm a forensic auditor. I know that when you corner a predator, it doesn't look for an exit, it looks for a throat. Monday morning, 8 a.m. I was at my desk at Miller, Grant & Thorne, sipping a black coffee that tasted like battery acid. My eyes were burning from the 3 hours of sleep I'd managed to steal. I was staring at the Vane master file on my encrypted drive when the glass door to my office swung open without a knock. It was Arthur Grant, the founding partner of the firm. He was 70 years old, with hair like silver wire, and a reputation for being the most ruthless man in the Boston financial sector. He wasn't smiling. He held a thick, manila envelope in his hand. Tamsin, he said, his voice like dry parchment, we need to go to the conference room, now. My stomach did a slow, nauseating roll. I knew what was in that envelope. I hadn't even sat down in the conference room before Arthur tossed a 3-page document onto the glass table. An ethics complaint was filed against you at 6 a.m. this morning, Arthur said. It came from the law offices of Silas and Vance. It alleges that you have used firm resources, our servers, our databases, our proprietary hacking tools, to conduct a personal vendetta and harass private citizens, specifically your parents and your brother. I picked up the document. I recognized the letterhead. Silas Thorne. My father's silent partner, the man who helped him bury the insurance report 12 years ago. The complaint states, Arthur continued, his eyes boring into mine, that you attempted to extort $600,000 from your father during a family dinner. It says you threatened to fabricate evidence of arson unless they signed over their assets to you. There are affidavits, Tamsin, from your mother, from your brother. They say you've had a psychological break since your car accident last year. "I didn't have a car accident last year," I said, my voice cold and precise. "I had surgery for a ruptured appendix. They're rewriting the narrative, Arthur. They're trying to discredit me so the evidence I have becomes inadmissible. Poisoned fruit." "Is it true?" Arthur leaned forward. "Did you use the darkroom servers to pull a suppressed fire marshal's report from 2014? I didn't lie. You don't lie to Arthur Grant. Yes, because that report contains evidence of a felony committed by Alaric Vane, a felony that your primary investor, Julian Thorne, helped cover up." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Mentioning Julian Thorne was like mentioning a ghost in a cathedral. He was the firm's biggest client. He was the reason our bonuses were 6 figures. "You're treading on a landmine, Tamsin," Arthur whispered. "If you can't prove every single word of this, and I mean prove it with ironclad, non-circumstantial evidence, I won't just fire you, I will sue you into a different zip code. I'm placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately. Hand over your badge and your laptop." I looked at Arthur. I saw the fear behind his eyes. He wasn't protecting the firm's ethics. He was protecting the firm's pocketbook. "Keep the laptop," I said, sliding my badge across the table. "I don't need it. I've already moved the evidence. And Arthur, when Julian Thorne's name ends up on the front page of the Globe, don't call me asking for a settlement. The audit isn't just about my family anymore. It's about everyone who helped them." I walked out of the building with nothing but my phone and the keys to my car. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, but I also felt a strange, jagged thrill. They thought taking my job would paralyze me. They didn't realize that a forensic auditor without a job is just a hunter with nothing to lose. I didn't go home. My apartment was likely being watched, or worse, my father had a key. I drove to a neighborhood in South Boston where the buildings were mostly rusted corrugated metal and broken dreams. I pulled up to Dock 17. This was the warehouse I'd mentioned to Kael. My friend Mick was waiting by the loading bay. Mick was an ex-cop who did off-the-books logistics. He was the kind of man who knew how to find things that were meant to stay lost. "Tamsin," Mick said, spitting a toothpick onto the pavement, "your brother showed up an hour ago. He was screaming about his rights. I told him his only right was to pick up the crates or get out." "Where is he?" "In the back, crying over a pallet of industrial solvents." I walked into the dim, echoing space of the warehouse. The smell of oil and salt air was overpowering. I found Kael sitting on a wooden crate, his expensive suit jacket discarded on the floor, his face red and blotchy. "You think this is funny?" Kael shouted when he saw me. "Mom is at home having a breakdown. Dad is meeting with the lawyers, and you put me in this dump?" "I didn't put you here to work, Kael," I said, standing over him. "I put you here to talk, because the police are going to be at the house in 48 hours. Alaric is going to blame you. You know that, right?" Kael froze. "No, what are you talking about? Dad would never." "He already did. 12 years ago. He told the insurance company the fire started because you were playing with a chemistry set in the basement. He didn't blame me to the authorities, Kael. He blamed you. He only told me it was my fault to keep me paying the bills, but on the official record, you're the arsonist." I pulled out a tablet, a burner I'd picked up on the way. I showed him a scanned document. It was a secondary statement Alaric had filed with the insurance company in 2015. Statement of Alaric Vane. "My son Kael has always been prone to impulsive behavior. I believe his curiosity with flammable liquids led to the ignition. I'm seeking private treatment for him to avoid criminal charges." Kael's eyes went wide. He shook his hands trembling. No, he said he protected me. He said he paid off the marshal to keep me out of jail." "He didn't pay to keep you out of jail, Kael. He paid to keep the insurance money. He used you as a scapegoat so he could collect the check. And now he's doing it again. He's telling the firm that you were the one who pushed him to extort me. He's going to let you take the fall for the fraud, while he and Julian Thorne disappear to a villa in Italy." Kael looked at the document, then at the grimy floor of the warehouse. The golden boy was finally seeing the lead under the gold leaf. "What do I do?" he whispered. "Tamsin, please, I don't want to go to prison." "Then you're going to help me finish the audit. I need the keys to Alaric's private safe in the workshop, not the one in the house, the one in his office at the firm, the one he thinks nobody knows about. I don't have them. But you know where they are, Kael. You're the reliable son, remember? He trusts you with the little errands." Kael took a deep breath. "He keeps them in his cufflink box, the silver ones with the Vane crest. He wears them every Tuesday for the board meetings." "Tomorrow is Tuesday," I said. "You're going to the house, you're going to get those keys, and then you're going to meet me at the firm at midnight." Midnight at Vane Architectural Associates was a haunting experience. The building was a masterpiece of glass and steel, a monument to Alaric's ego. Kael was waiting at the side entrance. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He handed me a small silver key. His hand was shaking so hard the key rattled against my palm. "He's in there," Kael whispered. "Dad, he stayed late. He's with Julian Thorne." "Even better," I said. "Go to the car, Kael. Keep the engine running. If I'm not out in 20 minutes, drive to Silas's house and tell him the audit is complete." I slipped into the building. My feet made no sound on the polished marble. I didn't go to the main office. I went to the mechanical room on the 4th floor. Every building Alaric designed had a signature, a small hidden crawl space behind the HVAC units, where he kept his original hand-drawn blueprints. He was old-fashioned that way. He didn't trust the cloud. I found the panel. I slid the silver key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, oily click. Inside wasn't just blueprints. It was a black box, a literal flight recorder for his career. I opened the box. My breath hitched. It was a ledger, not a digital one, but a handwritten one, my father's real architecture of blood. It contained every bribe, every kickback, and every consulting fee paid to Julian Thorne over 20 years. But there was something else. A photograph. It was a photo of the house fire, but it wasn't taken from the street. It was taken from the backyard 5 minutes before the fire department arrived. In the photo, Alaric was standing by the back door, holding a gas can, and standing next to him, his hand on Alaric's shoulder, was Julian Thorne. It wasn't just insurance fraud. It was a joint venture. Julian Thorne needed the fire to clear the land for a new development project that the historic Vane house was blocking. They had burned my childhood for a zip code. "It's a beautiful photo, isn't it?" The voice came from the shadows behind me. I spun around, clutching the ledger to my chest. Alaric was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and he was holding a heavy metal flashlight like a club. Behind him stood Julian Thorne. Thorne looked bored, like he was waiting for a slow elevator. "Tamsin," Julian Thorne said, his voice smooth and devoid of any emotion, "you really should have taken the administrative leave. It's a very comfortable pension." "I don't want a pension," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I want a conviction." "A conviction requires a witness," Alaric said, stepping into the room. His eyes were wide, glowing with a frantic, desperate energy. "And right now, all I see is a disgruntled employee trespassing in a secure facility. You've had a hard year, Tamsin. The accident, the stress, it's tragic how you've spiraled." "Kael told me everything, Alaric," I said, backing towards the HVAC unit. "He's at the police station right now. He has the fire marshal's report." Alaric laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Kael is a coward. He's currently sitting in your car waiting for me to come down and tell him everything is okay. He gave me the keys, Tamsin. He told me you were coming here." My blood turned to ice. Kael, the golden boy, had betrayed me one last time. "Now," Julian Thorne said, checking his watch, "give Alaric the ledger, Tamsin, and maybe we can discuss a medical facility where you can get the help you so clearly need." Alaric moved closer, the heavy metal flashlight raised. "Give it to me, you ungrateful bitch. You've cost me enough." I looked at the ledger. I looked at the man who had burned my world twice. And then I looked at the red fire alarm pull station on the wall behind him. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "The Vane name is a legacy, and legacies are meant to be burned." I didn't give him the ledger. I lunged forward, not at Alaric, but at the fire alarm. I pulled it with everything I had. The building erupted in a deafening, rhythmic shriek. Strobe lights began to flash, blinding Alaric. The magnetic locks on the doors clicked open automatically, a safety feature for fire emergencies. "Police are 5 blocks away," I screamed over the alarm. "And this time, Alaric, there's not enough insurance in the world to save you." I bolted past him, heading for the emergency stairs. I could hear Alaric roaring behind me, his footsteps heavy on the metal grates. I didn't head for the car. I knew Kael would be gone. I headed for the roof. I burst through the roof door into the cold midnight air. The wind was whipping around the skyscrapers, howling like a wounded animal. I ran to the edge, looking down at the street. Blue and red lights were already turning the corner.
Alaric burst onto the roof a second later. He was gasping for air, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "Give it to me," he screamed, moving toward me. "Give it to me, or I'll throw you off this roof myself." "The audit is finished, Alaric," I yelled, holding the ledger over the edge of the building. "Look down!" Below us, Kael wasn't driving away. The car was surrounded by police. Kael was standing there, his hands in the air, but he was pointing up at the roof. He hadn't betrayed me. He had been the bait. Alaric stopped. He looked at the street, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The coward had finally found his spine. "It's over," I said. "The blood debt is paid." Alaric didn't jump. He didn't fight. He simply dropped the flashlight and fell to his knees as the first SWAT team burst onto the roof. 6 months later. I was sitting in a new office. It was small, independent, and had my name on the door, Thorne and Vane Forensic Consulting. Silas Thorne, Julian's brother, was my partner. He had been the one to provide the final link in the chain of evidence that sent Julian Thorne and Alaric Vane to federal prison for 25 years. My mother, Margot, had disappeared. She took what was left of the offshore accounts and moved to a country without an extradition treaty. I haven't heard from her, and I don't want to. Kael? Kael is actually working at that warehouse. He's the assistant manager now. He's sober, he's tired, and for the first time in his life, he's happy. He calls me every Sunday. We don't talk about the fire, we talk about the future. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the black ledger. It was a piece of evidence now, destined for a museum of white-collar crime. I opened it to the last page. I didn't write a number, I didn't write a debt. I wrote a single word: solvent. The Vane family was liquidated, and I was finally free. The trial of Alaric Vane and Julian Vane didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in a theater of ghosts. The Moakley Federal Courthouse was a fortress of glass overlooking the harbor, a place where the sunlight felt like an interrogation. I sat in the witness room, staring at my reflection in a silver water pitcher. I looked different. The senior auditor was gone, replaced by a woman who had systematically dismantled her own origin story. My partner, Silas Thorne, sat across from me, his weathered hands resting on a cane. "They're going to use the mother card today, Tamsin," Silas said. His voice was a low warning. "Your father's defense team just entered a new piece of evidence, a medical record from 1991, something about your birth." "My birth?" I frowned. "Silas, Alaric is facing 25 years for arson and racketeering. What does 1991 have to do with anything?" "Character assassination," Silas grunted. "They want to prove that you've been a predator since the day you were born. Be ready." I was called to the stand at 10:15 a.m. The room was packed with the elite of Boston, the people who had spent decades admiring Alaric's buildings while ignoring the cracks in his character.
My father sat behind the defense table, looking regal in a charcoal suit. He didn't look like a prisoner, he looked like a man waiting for a gala to begin. The defense attorney, a shark named Dominic Vesper, stood up. He didn't lead with the fire, he led with a photograph. It was me at age 5, standing in a garden, holding a dead bird. "Miss Vane," Vesper said, his voice oily, "your mother, Margot, has provided a statement. She says that even as a child you displayed a disturbing lack of empathy. She says you were the one who killed this bird. She says you've always been a girl who liked to watch things break." "My mother is currently a fugitive in Costa Rica, Mr. Vesper," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "I'm sure her statement was written in exchange for the wire transfer my father sent to his offshore account last week. As for the bird, a cat killed it. I was trying to bury it." "A cat," Vesper sneered, "or perhaps the same inner fire that led you to burn down your family home and then wait 10 years to extort your father for his life savings." "I didn't extort him," I said, leaning into the microphone. "I audited him. There's a difference. Extortion is taking what isn't yours. Auditing is taking back what was stolen." For 3 hours, Vesper tried to shred me. He brought up my school records, my cold personality, my lack of friends. He tried to make the jury see a sociopath instead of a whistleblower. But he made one mistake. He asked about the Switzerland debt. "You claim your father lied about the medical bills," Vesper said, "but we have the receipts, signed by the clinic directors. Real paper, Miss Vane, not digital ghosts." "I'd like to see them," I said. Vesper smirked and handed a folder to the bailiff. "Defense Exhibit D, the Esprit de Vie invoices, totaling $450,000. I opened the folder. I didn't look at the signatures. I looked at the ink. "Mr. Vesper," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face, "do you know what metamerism is in forensic auditing? It's when ink looks identical under one light source, but different under another. But there's an even simpler test." I held the paper up to the light of the courtroom window. "The watermarks on this paper are for a company called Alpine Bond. That company didn't start manufacturing this specific recycled fiber until 2021, and yet these invoices are dated 2014. The courtroom went silent. The judge, a woman who had seen everything, leaned forward. "Are you saying the evidence is forged, Miss Vane?" "I'm saying my father is an architect," I said, looking directly at Alaric. "He's an expert at blueprints. He thought he could design a past that never existed. But he forgot that a building is only as strong as its foundation, and his foundation is made of lies." The trial paused for lunch. I was walking through the hallway when a woman in a heavy veil and a trench coat stepped out from behind a pillar. She grabbed my arm with a grip that felt like a claw. "Tamsin." It was Margot. She looked older, her skin sallow, the fugitive life clearly not agreeing with her. "Mom? What are you doing here? There's a warrant for your arrest." "I made a deal," she whispered, her eyes darting around the hallway. "The DA granted me immunity if I testified against Alaric. But Tamsin, you have to stop this. You have to drop the insurance fraud charges." "Why would I do that? He ruined my life." "Because he didn't do it alone," Margot hissed. "You think Alaric was smart enough to set that fire, to set up the Cayman accounts? He's an artist, Tamsin. I was the one with the business degree. I was the one who pulled the strings." I stepped back, the world tilting on its axis. "You burned the house?" "We were going to lose everything," she pleaded. "The firm was bankrupt. You were going to have to drop out of college. Kael was a mess. I did it for us. But then Alaric, he liked the power it gave him over you. He loved that you felt like you owed him. He took my crime and turned it into his masterpiece." "And Kael?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Kael was 12, Tamsin. He saw me in the basement with the kerosene. He's been silent for 20 years because he's terrified of me, not Alaric." "Me?"
"Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Alaric has a second ledger," she said. "The one from the workshop. The one you didn't find. It contains the names of the judges he bribed, the politicians Julian Thorne bought, and it contains proof that you were the one who signed the insurance claim in 2015. He forged your signature so perfectly that if he goes down, he's taking you with him. He'll call it collusion." "He can try," I said, pulling my arm away. "But I'm a forensic auditor. I know the difference between a real signature and a perfect forgery, and I know the difference between a mother and a parasite." "Tamsin, wait!" I didn't wait. I walked back into the courtroom. The final hour of the trial was a bloodbath. I was back on the stand. Alaric's lawyer, Vesper, was ready for the kill. He pulled out the secret ledger, the one Margot had warned me about. "Miss Vane," Vesper said, his voice booming, "we have a document here, an insurance disbursement form from 2015, the final payout. It bears your signature, not your father's, yours. It seems the victim was actually a co-conspirator." The jury leaned in. This was the moment. The hero was about to be revealed as a thief. "I've seen that document," I said calmly. "And is it your signature?" "It is a perfect copy of my signature," I said, "but if the court looks at document 82 in my master file, the one I pulled from my father's private drafting computer, you will find the stroke path data. My father used a digital plotter, the kind he uses for architectural blueprints, to trace my signature from my college graduation card." I looked at Alaric. He was gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. "An architect leaves a fingerprint on everything he builds. A human hand has natural tremors, micropauses, and variations in pressure. A digital plotter has none. That signature is mathematically perfect, which is, in forensic science, the proof that it is a forgery. Only a machine is that consistent. Only a man as arrogant as Alaric Vane would think he could outmath the truth." Alaric snapped. He didn't scream, he didn't roar, he simply stood up and looked at Julian Thorne, who was sitting 3 rows back. I told you she was too good. You should have let me handle her 12 years ago. You should have let her stay in the house." The courtroom erupted. The arson confession had just been delivered in front of a federal judge and a live court reporter. Julian Thorne closed his eyes, his face a mask of defeat. Alaric's own ego had finally pulled the trigger. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of my new home. It wasn't a mansion. It was a renovated loft in a quiet part of the city filled with light and the smell of fresh cedar. The Vane family legacy was gone. Alaric was serving 25 years at FMC Devons. Julian Thorne was in the cell next to him. My mother, Margot, was never heard from again. She vanished into the shadows of South America, a ghost with a suitcase full of stolen dreams. Kael was the surprise. He had testified against Alaric too. He had finally told the truth about the kerosene in the basement. He didn't want the money I'd saved for him. He wanted something else. He started a non-profit that helps kids who have been victims of domestic financial abuse. He's not a golden boy anymore. He's a man. I sat down at my desk and opened my personal ledger. For the first time in 34 years, the Vane account was empty. There was no debt. There was no blood money. There was just a balance of 0. In accounting, 0 is a beautiful number. It means the work is done. It means the past has been reconciled. I picked up a pen and wrote the final entry of the audit. Client, the Vane family. Status, liquidated. Recovery, complete. Notes, the auditor is finally home. I closed the book. I turned off the lights, and for the first time since I was 22 years old, I slept through the night without the smell of smoke in my dreams. The blood debt was paid, in full.